It was a beautiful evening, one that seemed almost magical as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft golden glow over the quaint historic district. The air was filled with a sense of nostalgia and charm, each cobblestone pathway and vintage street lamp adding to the timeless ambiance of the area. Mia and Daniel Thompson strolled along hand in hand, savoring every step as they moved through the streets, illuminated by the gentle, warm light. Tonight was a special night, a celebration of a journey they had embarked upon a decade ago, filled with both challenges and triumphs. This evening marked their 10th wedding anniversary, a milestone that resonated with love, respect, and deep connection. Dressed elegantly for the occasion, Mia wore a flowing, deep blue dress that shimmered slightly as she walked, her radiant smile amplifying her natural beauty. Her dark hair was pinned up with a touch of sparkle, showing off the graceful curve of her neck and the quiet confidence that had always drawn Daniel to her. Daniel, too, had made an effort for this momentous occasion. He was dressed in a tailored black suit, the classic attire fitting him perfectly and lending him a sense of effortless sophistication. His normally casual demeanor had shifted tonight into one of quiet pride and adoration as he looked at his wife. They moved through the district with a sense of purpose and excitement, radiating joy and drawing glances from passers-by who couldn't help but smile, as if they were witnessing a scene out of a romance film. Their destination was a high-end, exclusive restaurant located at the heart of this district, known for its refined decor, exceptional cuisine, and reputation as a landmark for anniversaries and other celebrations. This restaurant was the ideal spot for a couple looking to indulge in something special. Mia and Daniel had made the reservation weeks ago, planning every detail of this evening. They had chosen the restaurant for its history, for the elegance it projected, and because they knew it would be a place where they could immerse themselves in the magic of the night. Each step they took toward the entrance felt like a step into a beautiful memory, a night that would be remembered for years to come. But inside, hidden behind the glass doors, a different scene was unfolding. Watching from within the dimly lit restaurant was Robert, the owner. Robert was a man whose appearance matched the traditional decor of the establishment. Neat, with his hair slicked back, wearing a crisp white shirt and a black vest that matched the formal yet antiquated style of his restaurant. He had run this place for decades, and in those years, he had created an atmosphere of exclusivity, catering to what he saw as a certain kind of clientele. His worldview, shaped by years of narrow-minded thinking, allowed no room for those he deemed outsiders, regardless of their demeanor, appearance, or elegance. As Mia and Daniel drew closer to the entrance, Robert watched them intently, his expression hardening. His prejudices surfaced instantly, forming a harsh judgment of the couple walking toward his establishment. In his mind, they simply did not belong. He didn't see their love, their joy, or their elegant attire. All he saw was a couple who, in his eyes, was out of place in the refined environment he believed he had carefully curated for people who belonged. There was a moment of tension in his gaze as he continued to watch them, a sense of self-assured superiority clouding his perspective and preventing him from seeing anything beyond his outdated biases. Unaware of Robert's gaze or the judgment he was silently passing, Mia and Daniel finally reached the entrance, their faces lit up with anticipation and warmth. As they approached, Daniel reached for the door, ready to step inside with his beloved wife. But before he could enter, Robert appeared in the doorway, blocking their path. He wore a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, and there was a stiffness to his stance that hinted at the underlying hostility he held. "I'm afraid we're fully booked," he said, his tone as crisp as his attire, but his eyes betraying a dismissive coldness. Mia and Daniel exchanged a quick, surprised glance. This was unexpected. They had made a reservation in advance and everything had been confirmed. There should have been no issue with their entry. Daniel, sensing the subtle hostility behind Robert's words, glanced calmly at the man, maintaining his composure. "We have a reservation," Daniel said, his voice steady and polite. He gave his name, hoping to clear up what he assumed was a misunderstanding, but Robert merely shook his head, his tight smile remaining fixed, and repeated, "I'm afraid we're fully booked." The words hung in the air, each syllable layered with an unspoken message that needed no further explanation. It wasn't about reservations or tables. It was about Robert's prejudice, hidden behind the veneer of polite professionalism. Mia's face fell, the happiness that had been so evident moments ago now fading as the reality of the situation set in. She looked at Daniel, who held her hand gently, a reassuring touch that conveyed more than words ever could. He could see the disappointment in her eyes, the pain of having their special night tainted by something as ugly as prejudice. He understood her frustration, but knew that reacting emotionally wouldn't change the mind of someone like Robert. He gave her a comforting nod, his eyes conveying a message of patience and resilience. Choosing dignity over confrontation, Daniel kept his tone respectful and his expression calm, a stark contrast to the tension that radiated from Robert. Without another word, he took Mia's hand, turned away from the entrance, and led her down the path, their heads held high. As Mia and Daniel walked away from the restaurant, the air between them was heavy with unspoken feelings. The initial shock of the rejection had settled, leaving a mixture of disappointment and quiet hurt in its wake. Mia held on to Daniel's hand a little tighter, as if anchoring herself to him in that moment, drawing strength from his calm presence. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of anger or frustration. But Daniel's expression was serene, his jaw set with a subtle strength that she recognized well. He was not one to let others' small-mindedness unsettle him, even if their actions stung. And though he hadn't said anything yet, she knew he was processing this moment in his own way, turning it over in his mind and examining it from all angles. As they strolled down the street, Daniel's mind returned to their encounter with Robert, dissecting each word, each glance, and the unmistakable undertone that had accompanied them. He had dealt with people like Robert before, people who, despite being polite on the surface, carried with them deeply ingrained biases. It was never the loud, overt discrimination that took him by surprise, but rather these quiet, insidious moments that sometimes caught him off guard. The type of prejudice that hid behind a veneer of professionalism, the kind of hostility that was just subtle enough to be denied, but powerful enough to wound. He thought of the subtle stiffening of Robert's face, the way his tone, though polite, held an edge that couldn't be mistaken. And perhaps what struck him most was that Robert, without knowing a thing about them, had decided they didn't belong. Daniel knew that as a successful Black entrepreneur, he had broken through many of the barriers that Robert's generation still clung to. His work and dedication had led him to places and achievements that Robert could likely never imagine. He had built a thriving business from the ground up, overcoming countless obstacles, thriving in an industry where resilience and innovation were his constant allies. But tonight was not about his accomplishments or his professional identity. Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating his love for Mia, about the simple joy of being together. And yet, Robert had tarnished it with nothing more than a few calculatedly dismissive words. Mia was quiet beside him, still processing her own thoughts. This wasn't the first time they had faced such treatment, and it likely wouldn't be the last, but it hurt all the same. She thought about how much they had looked forward to this evening, how they had talked about it for weeks, planning every detail and counting down the days. Now she felt a sense of injustice brewing inside her. She wanted to speak up, to demand an apology, to make Robert see that his assumptions about them were not only wrong, but damaging. But she also knew that Daniel's approach to these situations was different. He wasn't one to seek confrontation, especially when he knew it would likely yield nothing but more bitterness. Instead, he preferred to respond with grace and quiet strength, a trait she had come to admire deeply. They passed a few other restaurants along the way, their vibrant atmospheres spilling out onto the street. Laughter and chatter floated from open doors, inviting them to join the festivities. But Daniel was still deep in thought, his mind working through the events of the evening. A part of him was tempted to let the matter go, to focus instead on salvaging the rest of the night with Mia. Yet there was another part of him, one that couldn't let this incident slide without at least addressing it in some way. He thought about the restaurant, the very one that Robert managed with such misplaced pride, and realized the irony in the situation. Unbeknownst to Robert, Daniel was poised to acquire the parent company that owned this establishment. Robert, in his ignorance, had turned away not just a customer, but the very person who would soon hold the power to shape the future of his career. Daniel glanced at Mia, his mind made up. This was no longer just about them, nor was it about getting an apology or correcting Robert's behavior in that moment. It was about making a choice that would ensure no one else had to experience that kind of humiliation, at least not at this restaurant. As he walked beside her, he felt a sense of responsibility to act, not for himself, but for the countless others who might face Robert's prejudiced gatekeeping in the future. He understood that with his position came an ability to influence, to bring about real change, and that change, he realized, could start with this very restaurant. Mia sensed the shift in his mood, catching a glimpse of the resolve forming in his expression. She had seen that look before, in moments when Daniel had faced challenges head-on, overcoming them not with anger, but with a quiet, strategic focus. She admired that about him, that strength to turn pain into action, to transform adversity into a stepping stone for something greater. She gave his hand a gentle squeeze, her way of letting him know she was with him, that she trusted him to lead the way forward, no matter what he decided to do. As they continued walking, Daniel began to formulate a plan in his mind. The acquisition was already in progress, but he would add a new condition, one that would send a clear message to Robert and anyone who shared his views. If the deal went through, he would ensure that Robert's tenure at the restaurant came to an end. He would take this place, steeped in exclusionary practices, and turn it into a space where everyone, regardless of appearance or background, felt welcome. It would be a statement, a quiet but powerful correction to the kind of prejudice that Robert represented. And so with each step they took away from the restaurant, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. Tonight might have been tarnished, but their story wasn't over yet. In time, Robert would come to realize that his choices had consequences far beyond what he could have imagined. As Mia and Daniel continued down the cobblestone street, their steps in sync, an unspoken understanding settled between them. Mia's hand remained firmly in his, a tangible connection reminding them both of the strength they shared, a strength that had carried them through a decade of marriage and countless challenges. Daniel's thoughts raced, not with anger but with purpose, and an unwavering resolve began to form in his mind. For a moment he wished they could have stayed and confronted Robert, forced him to see them for who they truly were. But he knew that was unlikely to make a difference. Changing minds rooted in prejudice was a slow, often fruitless task. Instead, he focused on a different kind of justice, one that didn't require arguments or raised voices, but carried far more weight. As they walked, the night air filled with the sounds of other couples and families enjoying their evening out. Laughter echoed from nearby cafes, the clinking of glasses and soft strains of live music drifting out into the street. Each scene they passed, a couple leaning close over a table, friends sharing stories and hearty laughs, reminded Daniel of what he and Mia had hoped for tonight, an evening of joy, celebration, and intimacy. The sting of the evening's early events still lingered, but with Mia by his side, he felt a renewed sense of determination to make the night memorable, if in a different way than they had planned. Mia, sensing the gears turning in Daniel's mind, spoke up softly, her voice a balm in the cool night. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" she asked, her tone a mix of knowing and curiosity. Daniel nodded, meeting her gaze with a small, thoughtful smile. "I am," he replied, pausing as if to weigh his next words. "It's strange, isn't it? People like Robert, they're so quick to judge, so quick to decide who belongs and who doesn't, without even knowing anything about us." Mia nodded, her expression contemplative. "It's more than strange. It's sad. To think he'd turn us away on a night like this, not because of who we are, but because of who he thinks we aren't." She gave his hand a squeeze, the warmth of her touch a reminder that they were in this together. "But I know you, Daniel. You're not just going to let this slide." Daniel chuckled softly, a hint of admiration for his wife's insight. "You're right," he admitted, his gaze turning forward as he spoke. "I don't like the idea of people like him deciding who's welcome and who isn't. And what's more, I don't want anyone else to have to experience that." His voice was calm, almost serene, but beneath that calm lay a determination that was unshakable. They continued walking, their conversation flowing naturally, almost like a strategy session between two partners who knew each other better than anyone else. When I think about it, Daniel said, it's almost ironic. The very restaurant that Robert guards so fiercely, he doesn't even realize he's about to lose his place there. He glanced at Mia, a quiet spark in his eyes. I think it's time someone showed him that the world has moved on from his narrow-minded ways. Mia smiled, a mixture of pride and affection lighting up her face. She had always admired Daniel's ability to turn difficult situations into opportunities for growth and change. She had seen him handle numerous challenges in his business with a level-headed approach, always focusing on what he could build rather than what others tried to break down. And now as she looked at him, she knew that he was approaching this situation with the same resolve. "So what are you going to do?" she asked, her voice soft but brimming with curiosity. Daniel took a moment to consider his response. "The acquisition is nearly finalized," he began thoughtfully, glancing at her with a reassuring smile. "But I'll be adding a condition before we close the deal. Robert's tenure at the restaurant will end. It's transformed into a place where people like him, with those kinds of exclusionary views, are no longer in charge. I want to see that restaurant become a place where everyone feels welcome, where the only thing that matters is the experience people have when they walk through those doors." He paused, watching her reaction, and saw the approval in her eyes. He knew that Mia understood not just his intentions, but the importance of them. This wasn't about revenge or spite, it was about reshaping an institution, creating something that stood as a symbol of inclusion rather than division. Mia's eyes sparkled with admiration, and she gave him a gentle nod. "It sounds like you already know exactly what you're going to do, and I think it's the right decision, Daniel." She leaned in closer, their shoulders brushing, grounding them in each other's presence. "You're not just changing a restaurant, you're setting an example, creating a space that people will feel proud to be a part of." Daniel absorbed her words, letting her encouragement settle into his heart. Together, they wandered a bit longer, their pace unhurried as they savored the night, making the best of the unexpected turn their evening had taken. Finally, as they came upon a warm and inviting restaurant at the edge of the district, they decided to stop in. The ambiance was lively but welcoming, filled with the sense of fresh food and laughter from the tables that surrounded them. As they were shown to their seats, they exchanged a look that conveyed their relief at finding such a pleasant place to continue their evening. Once they were seated, Mia looked around, taking in the surroundings and the smiles on the faces of those around them. "This feels right," she murmured, contentment replacing the earlier disappointment. Daniel agreed, his own spirit lifted by the welcoming energy of the place. As they settled in, Daniel's mind returned briefly to Robert, not with anger, but with a sense of purpose. He knew he had the chance to make a difference, and he wasn't going to let it slip by. He pictured the restaurant under new management, the transformation it would undergo, the way it would become a space that welcomed everyone, regardless of background or appearance. And he knew that when that day came, it would feel like more than just a business decision. It would be a victory for the kind of world he and Mia believed in. Over dinner, they spoke of the future, of dreams and plans that extended far beyond the events of the evening. Their laughter echoed softly as they reminisced about their past and imagined the adventures that lay ahead. And as they raised their glasses in a quiet toast to resilience, to love, and to the power of integrity, Daniel felt the weight of the evening lift from his shoulders. He understood that their story didn't end with one man's prejudice. Instead, it would carry on, fueled by the choices they made and the legacy they created together. As the evening wore on, Mia and Daniel found themselves comfortably settled in the warm atmosphere of the new restaurant. The soft hum of conversation around them created a cocoon of relaxation, giving them a reprieve from the tense encounter they had faced earlier. The lighting was gentle, the type that lent every table a sense of intimacy, and the walls were adorned with artwork that was eclectic and inviting, making the space feel lively yet personal. Every detail was thoughtful, designed to make each guest feel like they belonged, and it was a stark contrast to the cold rejection they'd experienced just a short while ago. Their meal arrived, beautifully presented and full of vibrant aromas, and they shared small bites, savoring each dish. The chef had crafted a menu that was both comforting and surprising, with flavors that spoke of creativity and passion. It was clear that the restaurant's owner had taken great care to create a place that felt welcoming and alive. Mia and Daniel enjoyed each dish slowly, letting the flavors bring them back to the present, grounding them in the joy of the moment. As they dined, Daniel's mind occasionally drifted back to his plans for the acquisition. In his mind, he could already picture the changes he would make, not only to ensure that Robert was no longer part of the business, but to transform the restaurant into a place of inclusion and warmth. He imagined adding small touches that would subtly encourage a sense of belonging, making it clear that everyone who walked through the door was valued. Perhaps he would introduce special events, themed nights that celebrated diversity and brought people together. He could see it so vividly, the way the restaurant would blossom under new management, the way the energy would shift from exclusion to acceptance. Mia watched him thoughtfully, noting the glimmer in his eyes as he mused over his plans. She knew that look well. It was the look he had whenever he was about to make a decision that went beyond business. Daniel's work had always been more than just profit and growth to him. It was a means of creating impact, of making a difference in the communities he touched. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his, bringing him back to the present. "Whatever you're thinking about," she said softly, "I know it's going to be incredible." Her smile was warm, carrying the encouragement he needed to hear. She knew him, understood the weight he carried in situations like these, and wanted him to feel supported in whatever he chose to do. Daniel smiled back, grateful for her steady support. "Thank you, Mia. This place tonight, it's been a reminder of what a restaurant can feel like when it's done right, when it's truly welcoming." He glanced around, watching the waitstaff move gracefully between tables, each of them attentive to their guests. "I want that for Robert's restaurant. I want people to feel like they're part of something, not like they're being judged before they even step through the door." Mia nodded, her gaze thoughtful as she took in his words. It's amazing how something as simple as a warm welcome can change everything, isn't it? You can feel it when people actually care about creating an experience for everyone, not just a select few. She looked around at the other diners, noticing the ease in their interactions, the way they seemed comfortable and happy, and she realized how powerful Daniel's vision could be. As the night progressed, they allowed themselves to let go of the earlier frustration, replacing it with excitement for the changes they knew were coming. The dessert arrived, a shared plate of delicate pastries and a decadent chocolate tart, and they laughed as they took turns trying each one. It was a small indulgence, a sweet reminder that this evening was still theirs, unblemished by the actions of one narrow-minded person. They didn't need validation from Robert or anyone else to know their worth, nor to enjoy the beauty of this milestone in their lives. At one point, as Daniel leaned back and looked around the bustling room, an idea struck him. He had always believed in the power of leadership to set the tone, to shape a company's values from the top down. He would ensure that the staff under his future management knew they were part of a team that prioritized respect, compassion, and community. The restaurant's success would hinge not on exclusivity, as Robert had tried to maintain, but on inclusivity, on becoming a place where people could come together, share meals, and connect in a meaningful way. He realized that the kind of team he built would be instrumental in fostering that environment, and he felt a surge of inspiration as he thought of the possibilities. He pictured the changes vividly, revamping the decor to make it brighter and more welcoming, adding artwork that represented the diverse cultures of the community, perhaps even hosting events that celebrated different heritages through food and music. He could bring in a chef known for their creative, cross-cultural dishes, someone who could bring new life to the menu and introduce patrons to flavors from around the world. He thought about hosting community nights with special discounts or family-style dinners where people could connect with those they might not normally meet. These events would celebrate the unique backgrounds and stories of each person who walked through the doors, weaving a tapestry of unity through shared experiences and shared meals. Lost in his thoughts, he almost didn't notice when the server approached their table, setting down the check with a kind smile and a brief, "I hope you two enjoyed everything. It was a pleasure serving you tonight." Her words were simple but genuine, and they struck Daniel in a way he hadn't anticipated. He realized that the atmosphere they had enjoyed tonight was built not just on the ambiance, but on the small gestures, the attentiveness and kindness of the staff who had made them feel welcome from the moment they arrived. As he looked over the check, he was filled with gratitude for the experience and left a generous tip as a token of his appreciation. He knew that each person who contributed to this restaurant's success played a role in creating a space that felt warm and open, and he wanted to reward that effort. He hoped that, in the future, his restaurant could cultivate a team of similarly dedicated and compassionate people, individuals who understood the value of creating a place where everyone felt they belonged. When they finally rose to leave, Daniel wrapped his arm around Mia's shoulders, pulling her close as they stepped back onto the cobbled streets. The night air was crisp, and the stars had come out in full, casting a serene light over the district. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each of them reflecting on the evening and the journey that lay ahead. The disappointment from earlier felt distant now, replaced by a sense of purpose and renewal. As they made their way back toward their car, Daniel stopped for a moment, looking up at the sky as if gathering his thoughts. Mia paused beside him, watching him quietly, giving him space to collect his words. "You know," he began, his voice soft, "I think this was the best way tonight could have gone, even if it wasn't what we planned." He looked down at her, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "Because it reminded me why I do what I do. It reminded me that success isn't just about financial growth or personal achievements. It's about the impact we can make, the people we can help." Mia's face softened as she listened, a sense of pride swelling within her. "And you're going to make that impact," she said with confidence, her hand finding his and giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You're going to turn that place into something amazing, something that will make people feel at home, no matter who they are." They walked the rest of the way hand in hand, feeling the strength of their bond, knowing that they were creating something together that went beyond themselves. They were building a legacy not only through the success of their ventures, but through the values they held dear. And as they drove home that night, the quiet hum of the engine underscoring the peace between them, they knew they were leaving behind not a night marred by exclusion, but a night filled with hope, the promise of change, and perhaps the start of a new chapter in the journey they had chosen to walk side by side. Days passed, and the memory of that night faded only slightly for Robert, the restaurant owner. He moved through his days with the same confident stride, overseeing his business with the sense of entitlement that had accompanied him through his years in hospitality. To Robert, the restaurant was his kingdom, a place where he set the rules and dictated the atmosphere. He took pride in his perceived ability to keep the establishment exclusive, to maintain an image that reflected the patrons he deemed worthy. He rarely gave a second thought to the people he turned away, convinced that he was protecting his space, his reputation, and his clientele. Robert's confidence was as steady as ever, bolstered by his long-standing relationships with regular customers who shared his outdated views, those who applauded his discerning nature. To him, the restaurant's prestige was wrapped up in its exclusivity. He felt a sense of power in being able to control who entered and who didn't, a satisfaction in maintaining a carefully crafted image. It was an image that, in his eyes, was refined and distinguished. But what Robert failed to see was that times were changing, and his methods, once considered acceptable, had become relics of a bygone era. One morning, Robert arrived at the restaurant as usual, stepping through the doors with his customary routine. He made his rounds, inspecting the tables and ensuring that everything was arranged to his meticulous standards. He noticed the way the staff would stiffen slightly when he approached, the way they kept their responses brief and polite, their movements restrained. Robert never considered that his own demeanor had created this atmosphere, a culture of tension and rigid formalities that stifled genuine warmth. To him, it was all part of maintaining a high-class environment. He moved to his office, tucked away in the back of the restaurant, where he would go over the day's reservations, ensuring that the guest list aligned with his expectations. As he sat down at his desk, he noticed an email notification blinking on his computer screen. It was from the parent company, the conglomerate that owned his restaurant and a handful of others. Robert regarded it with mild disinterest, assuming it was just another routine update or administrative memo. But as he opened the email, his eyes scanned the text, and a chill settled over him. The email was brief, its tone formal and direct. It informed him that the restaurant had been acquired by a new executive, someone who had recently taken over the parent company with plans to make significant changes. Effective immediately, it said, the new owner would be implementing a series of policy shifts starting with staffing changes that would better align with the company's evolving values and vision for inclusivity. At first, Robert's mind barely registered the words. The idea that his position might be in jeopardy seemed unthinkable. After all, he had been the face of this restaurant for years, a figure of authority and respect in his own eyes. He reread the email, his heart beginning to race as the implications started to sink in. There was no mention of him by name, but the language was clear. The new owner wanted to take the restaurant in a different direction, one that clearly clashed with Robert's long-held ideals. He read between the lines, understanding that his days at the restaurant might be numbered, that his style of management and his views no longer fit with the image the new leadership intended to cultivate. The certainty that had always grounded him now felt fragile, like a facade crumbling under the weight of change. He felt a knot of anger rise within him, mingled with disbelief. Who was this new owner, this person who dared to disrupt the order he had worked so hard to maintain? Robert's mind raced as he tried to piece together what little information he had. He had heard whispers, rumors about a wealthy entrepreneur acquiring the parent company, but he had brushed them aside, assuming that whoever it was would recognize the value of his management style, of the prestige he had curated over the years. It had never occurred to him that anyone would question his methods, let alone consider them outdated or exclusionary. To Robert, he was the epitome of class and tradition, a gatekeeper who understood the art of hospitality. But now, that carefully constructed image was beginning to fracture. As the days wore on, Robert found himself growing increasingly anxious, his once steady confidence slipping away in small increments. He began to notice changes around the restaurant, subtle shifts in the atmosphere that felt like a prelude to something bigger. The staff seemed more at ease, exchanging glances and whispers that left him feeling like an outsider in his own establishment. Even the regular customers he had cultivated over the years seemed distant, less inclined to engage in the usual pleasantries he used to offer as a form of camaraderie. It was as if a tide was shifting, and he was the only one left clinging to the old ways. One afternoon, as he was preparing to review the upcoming week's reservations, a representative from the parent company arrived unannounced, requesting a meeting in his office. Robert's heart sank as he ushered the man in, the gravity of the situation dawning on him fully for the first time. The representative, a well-dressed young man with an air of professionalism, wasted no time in getting to the point. He explained that the new owner had specific visions for the future of the restaurant, visions that included fostering a culture of inclusivity and respect, one that welcomed people from all walks of life. The words were carefully chosen, but the message was unmistakable. Robert's tenure was coming to an end. Robert struggled to keep his composure, his mind reeling as he tried to formulate a response. He attempted to argue his case, to explain that his methods had always upheld the restaurant's reputation, that his standards were what had made the place what it was. But the representative listened with a patient yet detached expression, his silence a stark reminder that Robert's words no longer held the weight they once did. The decision had been made, and nothing Robert could say would change the course that had been set in motion. As the meeting concluded, Robert was given a formal notice of termination, effective immediately. He sat in stunned silence, barely registering the representative's final words as he left the office. For the first time in years, Robert felt a sense of vulnerability, a crack in the armor he had worn for so long. He had built his identity around this restaurant, around the sense of control he wielded over who entered and who didn't. And now that identity was slipping away, leaving him with nothing but the remnants of a reputation that no longer held value. Over the next few hours, Robert moved through the motions of packing his belongings, his movements mechanical as he took down framed photos and mementos from his years of service. He felt the eyes of the staff on him, a mixture of curiosity and relief in their expressions as they watched him clear out his office. He knew what they were thinking, knew that many of them had longed for this moment, a release from the oppressive atmosphere he had created. The realization stung, adding a bitter edge to his already wounded pride. As he walked through the restaurant one last time, he paused at the doorway, looking out at the tables where he had once held court, where he had watched over the comings and goings of patrons with a sense of authority. But now that authority was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of loss that he couldn't quite put into words. He looked at the empty tables, at the soft glow of the lights casting shadows across the room. And for a fleeting moment, he wondered if perhaps he had been wrong, if perhaps his vision of exclusivity had cost him more than he realized. As he exited the building, the reality of his downfall settled over him like a weight he hadn't expected to bear. The street outside was bustling with life, people moving freely, laughing, and enjoying the city's energy. He felt like an outsider, a man displaced by a world that had moved on, leaving him behind. He walked away slowly, his footsteps heavy, each step taking him further from the life he had known. The sense of loss was profound, mingled with a bitterness that gnawed at him. But deep down, he knew that his own choices had led him here. In that moment, he couldn't help but recall the couple he had turned away, the look in their eyes as they left, a quiet dignity that now felt like an indictment of his own actions. Under Daniel's new ownership, the restaurant transformed in ways that rippled far beyond its four walls. Almost immediately, the changes were apparent. Subtle at first, but deeply felt by everyone who walked through the doors. The rigid atmosphere that had once clung to the place, an invisible barrier that seemed to separate guests and keep everyone at arm's length, began to lift. It was as if a weight had been removed, one that had lingered there so long it had gone unnoticed until it was finally gone. The staff felt it too, the freedom to smile, to engage warmly with guests, to enjoy their work without feeling the scrutinizing gaze that had once followed them from table to table. Slowly but surely, a new energy blossomed within the space, one that felt welcoming, inclusive, and genuine. Daniel's vision for the restaurant had been clear from the start. He wanted it to be a place where every person felt not only accepted, but celebrated. He spent countless hours working with the team, getting to know each employee, learning about their passions, their aspirations, and even their frustrations. He brought in new managers who shared his vision, people who valued warmth and openness over exclusivity, who understood that real hospitality wasn't about putting people in their place, but making them feel at home. His presence was calm but inspiring, and soon the entire team felt empowered to embody the values he had set forth. One of Daniel's first major changes was to overhaul the decor. Gone were the cold, monochromatic walls and stark fixtures that had given the restaurant an imposing, formal feel. In their place, he introduced warmer colors, rich with earthy tones and vibrant accents that created an atmosphere of comfort and charm. Local artists were invited to display their work, each piece adding a unique touch to the decor, transforming the walls into a gallery of diverse perspectives. Every piece had a story, and guests often found themselves admiring the art, sparking conversations about the local community and the people who contributed to it. The menu underwent a similar transformation. Daniel collaborated with a new chef who specialized in fusion cuisine, someone with a gift for blending flavors from different cultures into unique, memorable dishes. The chef was thrilled to have the creative freedom to craft a menu that represented a tapestry of flavors, each dish a nod to the different backgrounds and traditions that had influenced him throughout his career. Soon, the restaurant became known not only for its warm ambiance, but for its innovative, bold cuisine, a menu that invited guests to experience something new while feeling connected to the familiar. The restaurant's clientele began to shift as well. The rigid exclusivity that Robert had cultivated was replaced with an openness that welcomed people from all walks of life. Regulars continued to dine there, but they now found themselves seated next to new faces, families, couples, groups of friends, each bringing their own unique energy and stories. Daniel took pleasure in watching the blend of people who came through the doors, the laughter and conversation filling the space in a way that had once seemed impossible. On any given night, one could see an eclectic mix of patrons, young professionals, older couples, families, artists, students, all gathered under one roof, united by the simple joy of sharing a meal. But it wasn't just the aesthetic and the menu that changed. Daniel also made it a priority to invest in his staff. Recognizing the pivotal role they played in creating the restaurant's new identity, he implemented programs that encourage growth and development. He worked with the chef to create workshops where team members could learn about culinary techniques, giving everyone, from the servers to the dishwashers, a deeper understanding of the food they served. He introduced team-building exercises and monthly staff meetings where everyone was encouraged to share feedback, ideas, and stories. Gradually, a sense of community flourished within the staff, transforming them from a team into a family. One evening, as Daniel walked through the restaurant, greeting guests and checking in with the staff, he noticed a young couple seated by the window, laughing together as they admired a piece of art on the wall. They held hands, their smiles warm and genuine. And for a moment, Daniel was transported back to his own anniversary night with Mia. He thought of how different things had felt then, how a single person's prejudice had almost ruined their evening. But now, standing in this reimagined space, Daniel felt a sense of peace, knowing that couples like them would never experience that same rejection here. He had created a place where everyone was welcome, where every love, every friendship, every connection could flourish freely. The memory of his encounter with Robert still lingered, but it had transformed from a painful experience into a catalyst for change, a reminder of why he had chosen this path. As the restaurant's reputation grew, word spread about the inclusive, welcoming environment and the innovative menu that brought people together through shared experiences. Local newspapers featured the restaurant in glowing reviews, praising it as a new gem in the city's culinary scene. The shift in reputation didn't just bring in a diverse array of patrons, it also attracted talent. Chefs, servers, and managers from other establishments began seeking positions at the restaurant, drawn by the stories of its unique culture and the chance to be part of something meaningful. Daniel interviewed each applicant personally, ensuring they understood the values that underpinned the restaurant's identity. He hired people who were passionate, empathetic, and eager to contribute to the vibrant atmosphere he and his team had worked so hard to create. Over time, the restaurant became more than just a place to eat. It became a community hub. Daniel introduced community nights once a month, where the restaurant offered discounted prices and family-style meals designed to bring people together. Each community night featured a different cultural theme, complete with live music, guest chefs, and special menus celebrating the traditions of the local community and beyond. People from all backgrounds came together to enjoy these events, and each night was a unique experience, an exchange of stories, food, and laughter that left a lasting impression on everyone who attended. Daniel was proud of how the restaurant had evolved, how it had become a space that bridged differences and created connections that extended beyond a single meal. One day, as Daniel sat in his office going over the month's numbers, he received a letter. It was from a former staff member who had worked under Robert's management, someone who had left shortly after Daniel took over. The letter was filled with gratitude, the writer expressing their appreciation for the changes Daniel had made, changes that had made the restaurant feel like a place of hope and possibility rather than a place of exclusion. They spoke of the impact it had on them, how they had felt valued for the first time in their career, how they had seen their own views on hospitality and kindness evolve as a result. Daniel was moved by the words, a reminder that his work had reached beyond just customers and into the lives of those who had been part of the restaurant's transformation. Years later, the restaurant continued to thrive, a beloved fixture in the community that had left its mark on everyone who passed through. Mia often joined Daniel for meals there, and together they watched the joy on people's faces, the friendships forming over food and laughter, the warmth that filled every corner of the room. They knew they had built something special, a legacy that would carry on for years to come. The restaurant became a symbol of what was possible when people chose compassion over judgment, inclusivity over exclusion. Daniel had taken the bitter memory of prejudice and turned it into a story of resilience, a story of a place where love, respect, and connection were served with every dish.